Hey, my name is Matt Stohrer, and I repair saxophones for a living. Today, I would like to talk to you about the Buescher Snap-on Pad and Resonator. The Buescher, some people say Buescher or Bescher, uh, band instrument company made saxophones in the U.S., professional saxophones, up until the 50s or so. And they had a patented padding and resonator system called the Snap-on Pad from 1921 until the late 50s. In the early 60s, they got bought out by Selmer and transitioned to more intermediate student models, and the snaps were discontinued somewhere along the line because they were probably a little more expensive to make than regular pads. So the snap-on resonator was one of the first resonator systems used on saxophones. What is a resonator? Resonator is this guy. It is the metal or plastic tone reflector in the middle of a pad. And the reasons that Buescher came up with the system are manyfold. On the more practical side, the leather of a pad needs to be held down in the middle of the pad itself so that it doesn't billow or puff up over time. This was accomplished at one time with a stitch and then later with rivets. But obviously, the larger the object you have holding that leather down, the less apt it is to billow. Second, having a resonator actually does reflect some of the tone, and it can change the sound of your saxophone. And people are still using resonators, and it's now become a matter of course on saxophones, 80 something years later, or I guess, wow, 90 something years later now. So I would say that that is also a generally accepted fact that resonators are better than no resonators. The other reasons that they put this together are more about marketing. And they used to like to say that, well, first of all, they patented this whole system. They were the first to do it. It was a special feature their saxophones had, so it helped them sell instruments. And they used to like to say that you could take a pad and snap it into your saxophone and be done with the pad work. And I've actually got a couple things here that they wrote. Buescher patented snap-on pads, and you'll see it's snap-on, not snap-in, although most people call them snap-ins. Here's a cross section. There's the key cup, the pad, the snap. You just push a button. Assembly complete. And you could buy snaps and pads from Buescher, and they're fairly cheap. Although the snaps are reusable, but if you lost them or they became damaged because these little kind of leaves in the back are kind of fragile, then you could get other ones. This is an advertisement that Buescher put out, and I'll go ahead and read this to you. The voice of the saxophone originates with the vibration of the reed on the mouthpiece. The pitch of the tone is governed entirely by the distance from the tip of the reed to the tip of the first open tone hole. The distance of the pad, which acts as a soundboard from the tone hole, affects the tone. If too close, the tone is flat and muffled. Now look at the illustration above. See how the old-style soft pad has swollen down into the tone hole. The clearness and volume of the tone is lost against this soft, flabby soundboard. Even when new, soft pads absorb a good part of the tonal quality. The Buescher snap-on pad is a perfect soundboard. The snap button holds it flat and taut. Tone strikes this drum-like deflector and bursts forth in the fullness of its original volume, or with all the delicate sweetness of modulation, always clear and in perfect tune. The snap-on padded saxophone has a cultured voice. Snap-on pads are easily and quickly replaced, last 3 to 5 times longer, and enhance the beauty and power of the instrument's voice. A Buescher saxophone can be completely repadded without disassembling. This is our exclusive patented Buescher feature that should in itself be your decisive factor in favor of the true tone instrument. Some pretty flowery language there. So there's a old style pad which they have made look really, really awful. It's almost falling off into the tone hole. There's a beautiful snap-on pad held flat and taut. And again, there's a cross section of how the system works. So here is a pad cup. Here's the front. Here's the back. That is the snap spud. And what happens is here's the snap-on resonator. It's basically just like a little button, right? You put a pad in and then snap. There you go. Now, as far as doing pad work on these instruments, well, okay, first I'll back up. Now, Buescher's, there's a lot of argument over whether, these are better for the instrument or whether it makes the sound better or anything like that. I'm not going to touch that. You can Google that and find people arguing with surprising aggressiveness as to whether they think snaps should be left or removed. But what is a fact is that most people who are specifically looking for Bueschers of the vintage that would have snaps, which is 1921 through the late 50s, are going to be more interested in a saxophone that has all of its original snap-on resonators, and therefore the values will be higher. So at least for that one reason, it is helpful to have your original snaps maintained. But commonly you will see what we see here is that someone has ground out the snap-on spud in the back of this tone hole, or in the back of this key cup. This is a, what is this? Palm E flat. And someone has ground out the little spud. Now, these can actually be renewed if someone has ground them out. The earliest true tones, and this is a Buescher Aristocrat, a big B we're looking at here. If you look at the spud, you can see it's got a pretty small backing, and that is silver soldered into place. And silver solder requires a very high temperature to do, so you would ruin all the lacquer on this pad cup trying to silver solder something in here. Or remove it by heating it up. So that's why they get ground out versus removed by heating it. But the earliest true tones actually had spuds, and you can see into my stash here, that were soft soldered onto the back of the pad cup. And they've got a nice big flat area on the back of the spud, and you could soft solder that into the pad cup. And this is such a small, light piece of metal that you can soft solder one of these back into a nice flattened out pad cup and not even burn the lacquer on the other side if you're careful. So if you need to renew the spuds on a Buescher saxophone that's had them removed, you can buy a really old Junker True Tone. I'm not sure of the serial numbers, but I think it's any of the ones that have snaps up to around 90 or 100,000 serial number. And you can harvest the snaps and the spuds off that instrument to renew one that has been removed or damaged. So it's possible to put them back on, and it's really not that difficult as long as you've got the original parts. So that's the argument for keeping them. So if you're going to keep them, how do you do the pad work? Well, there's several different options, and you'll see on an original instrument if they've got the original pads or if someone's been using the original style pads. Here's how you remove a snap. Take something smooth, flat. You can even use like a butter knife. Gently pop the snap out. And then the old style pads didn't actually use adhesive, so they will just come right out. And they've got a metal backing, and the way that you were expected to install them was just pop the pad in, pop the snap on, and then bend the key cup around to fit to get it to seal, and then clamp it shut because they were fairly puffy, soft pads. This is not the method that I use, although you can still buy replacement metal-backed pads, of which this is one. I personally find the quality to be lacking compared to other pads that are accessible, and also this method lacks the flexibility I like in seating pads. So the way I do it, and this is actually quite easy. It doesn't take that much more time than a regular pad job. So I take a regular pad, here you go, I just punch a hole in the middle, and the hole has to be big enough that the snap leaves can fit in there with a tiny bit of movement because everything's not always centered. So I take a regular pad, I apply adhesive in a ring around the outside, and you're going to be using much less than normal, but just enough to kind of hold things in place and give you a little bit of wiggle room if you want to do some floating. So apply adhesive, stick the pad in the pad cup, put the snap on, and then proceed as normal. If you've got level tone holes, level pad cups, which particularly on Bueschers with snaps is a concern because, like I said earlier, if you use the original style pads, you're expected to cold or dry pad, is what it's called, by bending things around to make things fit. So a lot of times when you take the older instruments apart, you'll find that key cups are kind of not level. And sometimes you even find that they have bent a particular portion of the key cup down or up to make things seat. But if you've flattened if you've leveled your key cup and you've leveled your tone hole and you've got the key cup sitting in the right attitude to the tone hole, you're not going to need to float very much. So having this resonator holding things down in the middle isn't going to really cause you any problems. And the adhesive that you've put in a ring around the pad is going to be exactly in the spot opposite the tone hole where you might need to push or pull just a little bit. And you can push with your pad slick and you can pull with your pin vise and get a very nice long-lasting seat that looks gorgeous and reuses the original snaps without too much trouble. I charge a little bit extra to reuse original snaps just because of the extra time required to take these out, clean them, clean out the pad cups, and straighten everything so that I can reuse them. But as far as the actual, once I get that done, the padding time is usually not that much extra, if any. Another thing you want to make sure is that when you get these out, these leaves here, kind of that, that snap it in place, can become loose or bent. And you want to like just very, very gently tighten things back in. And I've already done it to this one, so you're not going to see much move. But you want to make that nice and tight so that when you snap it on, it doesn't either pop off or vibrate around when you are playing the instrument. Now, sometimes if you've got a loose snap, you'll be playing and you'll hear or feel a buzz as you play, and it'll be very difficult to locate, but it's going to be a snap that's slightly loose. You can also get around that by applying a tiny bit of adhesive on the inside here before you put it on, but I don't find that to be necessary as long as you tighten these leaves. So that is Buescher snap-on resonators, introduced in around 1921 when they were patented until the late 50s. Two different types. You've got the silver soldered Spud, and then you've got the soft soldered Spud, and you can replace a ground out silver soldered Spud with a soft soldered Spud that you harvest out of an earlier True Tone. And you can either pad them in the original method, dry padding with the metal back pads. Some people will do a little bit of adhesive in the metal back pads to make sure they don't rotate in the pad cup. Or you can just use regular pads with a hole punched in it. And I've also seen people do regular pads with a hole punched but no adhesive, but I have not seen that done well more than once. There's one guy I know that does it that way, and I've seen his pad work and it's amazing, and I have no idea how he accomplishes it because I sure couldn't. But there you go. That is Buescher snap-on saxophone pads and resonators. My name is Matt Stohrer. I repair saxophones for a living. I hope you found this helpful, informative, useful, interesting. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment here on YouTube, to send me an email, to give me a call, to check out my website. However you'd like, get in touch. I love to talk saxophones, as you can probably tell. Thanks for watching.